toward the end of wholeness, we can think about, I've heard you speak eloquently about this idea that what we are is people of the forest. We are bodies that are a part of the earth, that we are the earth, that we are forest dwelling creatures, and that it is for us to that the forest is for us to be in and to be around. And I've heard you describe many benefits to forest bathing. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. And in my practice, I do this even very practically when I'm working with people. You know how you might go to the doctor and they might say to you, "Oh yeah, and looks like you might be pre-diabetic. Try to eat better and exercise a little more." And then they send you out the door, and it's like, okay, how helpful was that? Not very, right? I've got two jobs and I'm a single mom, and how am I going to get more exercise into my life, or I can't afford that healthy or fancy organic food or whatever it is, or I can but there's nowhere near me, or all of these factors, right, that can come into play that get ignored when there's kind of a one-off kind of quippy, like, go do that. So for instance, with forest bathing, and we could expand that further, because for some folks maybe it's the shore and the sound of the waves breaking on the shore. And right, if you don't have woods near you, you've got some beautiful place near you. And But you sometimes have to get a little creative about it. So I'll talk to folks that I'm working with, and I'll say, hey, do you do you ever go barefoot? Do you ever go into more calm environments? Are there parks or green spaces? And some of us are so much more privileged than others, right? Like in New York City, for instance, it's one of the most bifurcated cities that there are in terms of who lives near green space. In New York, you're either living in it next to a big, beautiful, wonderful park, or you got nothing. And
Mm.
that's racially divided and economically divided, and so it can be stark. But that said, you figure out, like, what can you do, right? What can you do, and what works for your schedule? And even if it's just once a week, kind of getting to those calmer spaces, even within our cities or within our environments. And like I said earlier, people living in more rural places too, they're often just staring at that through the windshield of their car and then walking inside. They're not bathing in it any more than anybody else is. And it can be these small things like the dandelions coming up from the cracks, right? Or the ailanthus trees coming up in those empty lots, and the squirrels. And I used to take my daughter um, through the city just looking for wildlife, right? It's a different kind of wildlife, but it's beautiful in its own way. Um, and for me, this, I think we all need this. It's certainly a bias of mine because of how important it's been for my own health and well-being on all levels: mental, emotional, physical. But I do believe this is biologically who and what we are. We have evolved on the earth not for thousands of years, not for tens of thousands of years, not even for 1 million years, which is when we've been kind of hominid in form, sort of, starting to become what we recognize now as human. But we've been here for since the beginning of life. We've been here for hundreds of millions of years. This form that we're in now, this human form, is only the very tip of the end of a long process, and it's very temporary for our own individual lives, but also as a species, as a form of organism. This is not really, in my opinion at least, this might not resonate with everyone, but for myself, this is not what matters. We've barely been on the earth in this form, but we've been here all along. And we're constantly shifting and changing. And this form that we're in now would not have even made any sense in an abstract way. You've got aliens in a distant galaxy creating this. No, this makes sense because of Earth, because of the specific gravity of the planet Earth, because of the composition of our atmosphere, because of the plants and other animals we're co-evolving with. This is the form we have because of being in that context. So being divorced from that, we're just setting ourselves up, among other things, I think, to be god-awful lonely, right? If we just live in a world that's defined by humans, we're missing all of this that we're a part of, that we're an intrinsic part of, that's part of us. And instead, we're just seeing this tiny little sliver of the spectrum of who and what we are and saying, well, that's what I'm paying attention to. And there's so much loneliness in the world, even more so with COVID, but so much, and so much depression and anxiety, and so much, I think, pain that we can bring onto others, right? By not recognizing and seeing, without sounding too romantic about it all, without recognizing that interconnectedness that we really do have, that our bodies don't stop at our fingertips, that this is what we're a part of. And I see it just resonate with people when I talk to them in my practice. I don't give them a big, long, boring speech like I'm doing now, but I just say, hey, do you ever get to green spaces? How does that make you feel? Almost everybody, really, we already all know it. I don't need to tell people that. They know it, they say it or volunteer it, or when I say it, it resonates immediately. And now I'm just there to problem solve with them and to support them and to recognize the significance and importance of that, because we're not hearing it from the other mainstream sources. So we have to counter that. And we could get all into the science of forest bathing. We know what it does. We know it helps us in ways that are not just by being calming and reducing anxiety and blood pressure, but regulating blood sugar, regulating our immune system. Literally, the monoterpenes, the essential oils that the trees are putting out into the air, we breathe in and interact with our immune system and make sure we have a healthy regulation and production of immune cells, natural killer cells, and T cells, and so on. So there's all the science side of it, most of it out of Japan, but increasingly from other places. But then there's the intuitive, yeah, we all kind of know it side, and it's important. It's important we carve that out for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Right, indeed. Okay, so I've heard this and I've been with this, and I the first time I heard about forest bathing was in your class, but it's true that everybody knows this. As soon as you go out to any kind of place, you can even drive past a whole lot of trees, and if you can look out and see the tops of the trees, then somebody in your group is going to be like, "Oh my, what? It's so beautiful!" You know what I mean? Every time this happens. And so we already all know this, that getting into the forest, that we are from the forest. Even I feel like there's an innate knowing about that. But at the same time, I know that forever people have been doing the forest, and that I come from people who are forest creatures. I myself am descended from Potawatomi people, who are an indigenous group of people who come from the Great Lakes region of North America. That's an area of the world which, prior to what we might think of as climate change, it's like 5-6 months out the year, it's snow up to your chest. And my ancestors were like, this is cool, we're going to stay here. They were way harder than I am. So when it comes to forest bathing and this kind of thing, what about chiggers and shit?
Right.